Hey, thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you tuning in. This is Tuesday. We have a very special guest speaker today, and her name is Lindsey Burkhardt. Lindsey works for Prevent Child Abuse North Dakota. She is working with a statewide task force to develop and implement a comprehensive statewide approach to the prevention of child sexual abuse. She's also a mom and a volunteer with a local nonprofit organization that is dedicated to improving the self-esteem of adolescent girls. And you're an ordained minister. Is that right, Lindsey?
Yes, that's right.
Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today. Can you tell us a little bit more about the comprehensive statewide approach to preventing
Yes,
child abuse?
yes, I would love to. So the task force has been around since 2017, and some people don't know that North Dakota has a task force that's dedicated to preventing child sexual abuse.
Yeah,
So
I didn't know.
always, yeah, it's fun to talk about and share the work that we're doing.
Hmm.
We are really focused on primary prevention of child sexual abuse, and that involves stopping sexual abuse before it starts.
Yes.
So we have guiding pillars that really help drive our efforts, and those are rooted in policy, advocacy, legislation, education and awareness, collaboration, funding and growth, organizational policy and procedure, and lastly, prevention research. And those pillars help guide us in our efforts and really help us pave the way forward on how we can get to the primary prevention of sexual abuse.
That sounds amazing. It really does. Now, how prevalent is sexual abuse in North Dakota here?
So, statistically speaking, the prevalence is 1 in every 10 North Dakota children will be a victim of child sexual abuse by their 18th birthday.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, what we know is that these numbers really likely underestimate the true impact of the problem. Research estimates that as many as 33% of victims never tell anyone that they were sexually abused. And
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
They don't
yeah,
have they don't have the words for it. They're
no,
children. They have no idea what's
Right.
going on, and they actually believe that it's normal.
yeah,
Yeah.
and additionally, even into adulthood, people often don't disclose that they've been sexually abused, at least in 33% of the time.
Hmm.
And just thinking about the heavy secret that is to carry an entire lifetime. And
Yeah.
one study found that the average age of disclosure of child sexual abuse is 52 years old.
Yeah. No, I
53?
52.
Oh,
52.
50,
Yeah. No, I hear you
wow.
there. Yeah. I was sexually assaulted as a child. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's really hard to carry those secrets, and you have to carry them because the family tells you don't say anything.
Yeah.
Yeah. They really
Yeah,
do.
there's so many reasons
Hmm.
why children don't tell. I mean, they're confused,
Shame.
they don't know what's wrong, shame,
Exactly.
embarrassed.
Hmm.
And I think the biggest thing is when we start to understand the statistics around child sexual abuse, we understand that they might have a conflicted feeling of loyalty to the abuser,
Well, yeah.
or they might be fearful of being shunned or labeled or loved less. There's just so many reasons.
And because the body, I mean, let's face it, we have pleasure receptors. And
Yeah.
so
Hmm.
sometimes the child may actually be pleasured by it.
Yeah.
And that's confusing for them too.
It is very confusing.
Yeah.
Mixed
Yeah.
messages, yeah.
I
So,
think definitely confusing. Our bodies are wired to feel, good to touch,
yes,
but I think
yes,
that's why a lot around educating and empowering our children as well.
exactly. Teaching them what to say and how to say it, which
Mhm.
we're going to talk more about. So, first of all, let's define what child sexual abuse is, please.
So together, the North Dakota Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Task Force defines child sexual abuse as any interaction between a child and another person in which a child is used for sexual behaviors and activities through
Hmm.
contact and non-contact behaviors. And so we were really intentional when we were working on our definition because we, first of all, recognize that child sexual abuse does not always involve an adult and a child. Sometimes it includes two children.
Right,
Yeah.
So
right,
we're really intentional about not saying a child and an adult.
right.
So we not only added that recently to our definition, but also we added in the non-contact behaviors because a lot of times, we might think of sexual abuse as sexual touching of the body, but also it can include exposing a child to pornography or sexually explicit materials. It
Right.
can include voyeurism or exhibitionism, and those don't involve touch.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And, well, we're going to talk more about that, more about the predators and how they do it, how they, groom children. But, so who are the abusers? And could you share some statistics?
Yes, I would love to. So many of us grew up worried about strangers. I mean, I know
Yes.
I did. I grew up around the time that Jacob Wetterling was abducted, and I
Yeah.
remember being so fearful, and stranger danger was something that my mom often talked about. But when it comes to child sexual abuse, research shows that the greatest risk to children doesn't come from strangers, it comes from someone they know. And we
Yes.
know that 90% of children are sexually abused by someone they know. That's including people the family knows and trusts. So neighbors, coaches, teachers, and then they even
Babysitters.
break, yep, and then family members, cousins, siblings, grandparents, aunts, uncles. I mean, it's really...
Lindsey, let me wind back a little bit. I want to make sure I get the stats right here. What I heard you say was of the children who are abused, 98% are abused by someone they know.
90%.
90%, right?
That's still a very high percentage.
Yeah, it is very high.
Yeah. So then that would leave only 10% of children being sexually abused by a stranger.
Yeah.
Right.
So
Because I mean, when we think of pedophiles, for instance, we think of
Yeah.
the stranger that steals your kid.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why we do all the stranger danger stuff. I was a young mother
Yeah.
teaching my son about stranger danger during that time period. And, basically don't let anybody grab you.
Mm-hmm.
But we never told our children, if it's somebody they know, don't let them touch you either.
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. It's something that we just really... I mean, I remember being a child and nobody talked to me about my body safety. None of that was a conversation we had. And I mean, there was sexual abuse occurring in my family, and it's just something that we don't talk about.
Exactly.
So, and then even more shocking to me is the statistics around children abusing other children. So as many as 40% of children who are sexually abused are abused by older or more powerful children.
Okay.
Right.
And even there's been more research in this area recently. Dr. David Finkelhor out of New Hampshire, he's dedicated his life to working in crimes against children. And a recent national study he did found as many as 70% of children were sexually abused by other children. And although that's only one study, I mean, that's absolutely shocking.
It is.
That's happening.
Now, Lindsey, when you say that some children are abused by other children,
70%.
70%, right?
That's a huge
It's
percentage.
a pretty high figure.
Yeah.
The question I have in my mind is how far are you able to trace it back? I mean, the child doing the abusing, is
Are
it
they
reasonable
victims?
to assume that they themselves were victims somewhere along the line of some adult
Of
somewhere?
sexual abuse, yeah.
So, that's a
Good
really great
question.
question.
Thank you.
So just because a child has been sexually abused does not mean that they will sexually abuse a child.
Right.
It can definitely be that child has been exposed to sexual abuse, and so then they go on to abuse, but that's not always the case.
Mm-hmm.
I think that there are different factors that can influence a child's decision to kind of engage in those problematic sexual behaviors or abusive behaviors. So they could have been exposed, and that can also be like pornography, or they've seen sexual encounters with people in their family, that curiosity kind of comes up. We also know that certain children are more likely to abuse, including children who maybe have developmental delays or are more more impulsive children.
Right.
Also, certain family characteristics can put children at risk for sexually abusing other children, and that can include the low tolerance of like empathy and acceptance, and using more of a harsh punishment style can make a child more likely to abuse other children. So there's just a lot of different factors that can potentially impact a child's decision to engage in problematic behavior.
Yeah, the same way that corporal punishment can help to create bullies who basically, I'm being hurt here. I want to hurt somebody in return because it makes me feel powerful. It can also affect children, to act out sexually, I think is if I'm hearing you correctly.
Yes. Yep.
Very
There
good.
are a lot. Yeah, I think the most recent research that I've been able to find is that there are really 4 major areas that can indicate whether a child will likely, and again, doesn't mean they will, but they may likely go on to sexually abuse. So researchers are learning more and more all the time around this behavior.
What are the 4 areas again?
Yeah.
So the 4 areas, you're going to test me now, aren't you?
I'm going to test you. Well, this would be to the tactics, right, that abusers use?
So this would specifically be around the children that go on to sexually abuse. So this is the 4 areas that researchers have found would be, the first one I talked about was exposure to sexuality. So that was where we talked about potentially children who had been sexually abused. Maybe they witnessed others engaged in sexual behavior, which we also talked about, and then that exposure to sexualized media like pornography. So that would be exposure to sexuality would be one area. Another area would be just those individual child characteristics, and we talked about those as well. So those impulsive children, potentially children with learning disorders or developmental delays. So then the third area is family adversity. So that would include factors that adversely impact caregivers' ability to provide safety, maybe their ability to provide supervision or guidance, or even just behavior management of their children.
Right, yeah.
And then the fourth area is the exposure to that coercive control or that aggressive control. And that's where we talked about like that harsh physical discipline, community violence even, or domestic violence. And what they found is that the children who are in those situations where they are in those harsh physical like punishments, those children are the ones that are most at risk for initiating some of those problematic sexual behaviors.
Right, I understand that. Yeah, and you were talking about delayed developmental abilities. So I know that children with like ADHD are very impulsive. Children who are not diagnosed for depression and anxiety disorders, which can come from a family situation. What about single mothers without fathers? Is that a concern as well?
Yes, it is a concern. So one of the things that I've spent a lot of time learning more about is what puts children at risk, because the more that we can understand children at risk, the more that we can likely layer on protective factors and try to keep them safe. So what I've learned is that, and we all know this, and I don't need to say it, but I'm going to, is that no child is immune, right? But we know that there are certain characteristics that can significantly heighten or lower the risk of sexual abuse. So family structure is the most important factor in child sexual abuse. And what they say is that children who are growing up with both of their biological parents they have a lower risk of being sexually abused.
Lower risk, yeah.
So then that risk increases for children who are living without either of their biological parents. So like children living in foster care, they're 10 times more likely to be victims of sexual abuse than children who are growing up with both of their parents. But the children who are most at risk are children who live with a single parent that has a live-in partner. They're at the highest risk of being sexually abused. I think what they figure is that they're 20 times more likely to be victims of sexual abuse than children who are living with both of their parents. So that's a huge risk factor.
Are we talking primarily by the live-in partner?
So research doesn't necessarily specify that, so I can't say for sure.
Okay.
I mean, I might assume that because I also know that. Yeah, in some cases, I think that I've had the opportunity to participate in lots of trainings, and I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah.
There are certain people who look for single moms because they have children, and that so those individuals may prey on those types of situations.
Easy access,
Yeah.
And can say, hey, babe, that's fine. You go do the shopping. I'll take care of the kids. No worries. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're actually abusing them. So just kind of off topic for a second. So what we're talking about when we're talking about biological parents or parents with children is basically they have a good female and a good male role model, so that, they're not looking for validation with a man or a woman outside of the family.
Yeah.
Is that what you'd say?
Yeah, I would say.
You could probably say it better.
Well, I don't actually know that I could say it better, just because I'm still new in the world of risk and protective factors, but I could assume that a child growing up with both of their biological parents, maybe they have more supervision.
Right.
They may have more monitoring. They may have more, and not necessarily in all cases, absolutely not, but I think that that might be some of the research behind it, because if we know that children who are, my brain is getting foggy. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I'll
It's
blame
It's all right.
It's okay. Don't worry about it. We're good.
But I think when we know that where the problematic sexual behavior comes from, children who are in some of those adverse family situations where a caregiver can't provide safety or they can't provide monitoring or behavior management, then those children are more at risk. So maybe living with both parents, there's an increased supervision, or there are more protective factors in place, potentially.
See, I knew you could say it better than I did.
Yeah.
Well,
Lindsey Burkhardt of Prevent Child Abuse of North Dakota, and we're going to continue with Lindsey. Let me ask you here, Lindsey, we'll cover this again toward the end of our discussion, but for the folks who do have questions or may have concerns, how do they get in touch with you?
They can visit the task force's website at www.ndstopcsa.com, and they would be able to find my information there.
And we also have it on the Facebook page right now. So
yeah, we have a Facebook page for our show.
Yeah, we upload the articles and things like that. But yeah, we're definitely going to.
Yeah,
that has definitely been uploaded. For
the bottom
show.
line, urlradio.net. Yeah.
No, not URL Radio.
Oh,
Facebook,
okay.
the bottom line Facebook.
The bottom line Facebook page. Got it.
He always does that. Always.
I'm not
always,
awake
always.
yet.
Even though I woke him up early.
Yeah.
Okay, so so now let's talk about. Hang on, I hate this because my phone shuts down.
Yeah.
My phone goes away. So, what tactics do abusers use to gain access to a child? And can you talk about grooming and red flag behaviors too?
Yeah, terms we hear a lot these days.
Yeah, we do. We hear it a lot now.
Yeah, I think we definitely hear that more and more all the time, and so I think it's good just to have a better understanding of what grooming is, and then what some of those behaviors may look like, so we can identify them early on, potentially. So a common strategy for those who sexually abuse children is grooming, and the thing that's tricky about grooming is it can typically look really innocent, but identifying grooming and red flag behaviors can aid in the prevention and also the detection of child sexual abuse. So it's really great that we started having these conversations and a better understanding. So grooming, and
with our children,
yep. And other adults who are around the children too, understanding that, wow, this really seems off, or something doesn't seem right. But grooming is manipulative behavior that an abuser uses to gain access to a potential victim, and then coerce them to agree to the abuse, and then really reduce their risk of being caught. And what we know is that grooming can happen in person, but it can also happen online.
Right.
And we know that it typically happens by someone that the child knows. And the thing about grooming is that it can be, it can take place over a short period of time or prolonged. So it can be days, weeks, months, or even years, potentially. Yep. And I think one thing that we really don't necessarily think about when it comes to grooming is that caregivers and parents can be groomed as well. So they're not just necessarily grooming the victim, but they may be a family around them as well, and that can look like a level of generosity that's probably too good to be true, right? Like you said, free babysitting or excessive willingness to help out, potentially financial assistance as well. And I think the thing that's really tricky about it, grooming, it can be just complicated, because this process of grooming is misleading, because the abuser might be someone who's well known, or they may be highly regarded in the community, right? We look in the and we see some of the people that are sexually abusing children, and as a result of these people's position in the community, sometimes it feels really easy to trust them.
Yeah, I mean, what do you do if you say it's a church pastor,
Yeah.
Or a beloved teacher in the child's
Or a
life?
coach.
That can be,
Yeah.
or a coach, like a phys ed coach.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, like
Yeah.
you said, many of them can be very high profile,
Yeah.
you know, but they're so good at grooming the children, grooming the family, that they keep that secret.
Yes. Yep. Exactly.
And as a child, I'm sorry, I was going to say, as a child, to a lot of these, to a lot of children, these folks are their heroes,
Right.
or they're good people in
Yep.
their life, and boy, can
Yep.
you get some real mixed, confusing messages from
can.
that.
Oh, absolutely. That conflicted feeling of loyalty, like, oh, I really look up to this person, or they help me so much in just say baseball, and they're so great, and then
Yeah.
they hurt me too. So yeah, what a really confusing feeling for a child.
Yeah. And especially since we kind of encourage our children to look up to these people as well.
Yeah,
Yeah. So we,
Yes.
you know, it's good if we let them know that not everybody's nice.
yeah,
Yeah.
Not everybody has their best interests at heart.
yeah,
Even people we think should have their best interests at heart may not.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And some of those, I'll just share a couple of what would potentially be red flag behaviors.
Yes,
And
Wonderful, please. Yeah.
it could be someone who is really just giving one specific child a lot of attention, seeking to have one-on-one time, maybe taking them on special outings or taking them to the hardware store for a quick errand, just really trying to spend time and get the child alone. It could also be gift giving. So a person who buys a child special gifts or treats or toys for no apparent reason. So it's not a birthday, it's not a Christmas present, it's just ongoing,
Right.
maybe giving money. And then also just someone who's overly interested in the child, and they might give the child special treatment, allowing that child to break rules. So I think it can be really hard, right? Because I think about
Yes.
my mom, who gives my children gifts literally all the time, and you talk to people and it's like, well, wait a second, that sounds like something someone who loves my child would do, and yeah, sometimes it does,
Yeah.
right? They
Yeah.
give them extra attention, but I think we really need to consider it as far as if you notice some of those red flag behaviors in a pattern, and a person who's really trying to gain access to that child, get them alone.
Right.
And I also think ultimately, as parents and caregivers and people out in the community, if something feels off, we really do need to trust that. Something doesn't seem right. I think we need to tune into some of those feelings as well.
We need to trust our guts as parents.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like you're saying, if a 58-year-old man just simply loves our little 3-year-old son,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with that. He's that's not appropriate at all. Yeah. The other thing I like to talk about in this subject is allowing people to hold your little children on their laps. Maybe not a smart thing to do. Because as a child I was held on people's laps and it wasn't a smart thing to do.
Right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yes, I do know what you mean. And I think I'm getting to I have 4 daughters, and
Yes.
so I talk with them a lot about consent and body autonomy. The decision is theirs. And
Yes.
so if their grandma wants them to come sit with them, I mean, that's ultimately my child's choice. And I let them
Right.
know that. They can
Yeah.
say no. And if they're uncomfortable, I would never force that. I mean, just like with anything else, a hug goodbye. If they don't want to
Yes.
hug an uncle goodbye, I'm not going to make them. And I feel for so long we've been oh, go hug grandma goodbye, go hug grandpa goodbye, and we just kind of force that on our children. And
Yes.
it's no, they're people, they have a choice here.
Right, we take
Yeah.
away their autonomy, take away their right
Yeah.
to say no. My
Yeah.
my niece, she has 2 boys, and she came out with her one son, who was 8 or 9 at the time, I think. And I had never met him before, and so I met them down at Barnes and Noble, and I met him.
Yeah.
And my niece said, "So give your Aunt Lissa a kiss and a hug."
Okay.
And Aunt Lissa said, because he was going over and really hiding behind mommy. And I said, T, he does not have to give me a kiss and a hug. I said, if he doesn't want to, that's fine. How about a handshake? Are you comfortable with a handshake, or are you comfortable with a fist bump? He was comfortable with a handshake,
high
so we
five.
did a handshake,
Sure.
And he
Yeah.
felt more comfortable with that, and that was his decision. I offered him choices, and that was his decision. But this whole thing that grandparents and family members do, oh, it makes me happy to kiss you.
Yes.
But does it make the child happy to be kissed by you? You know?
Right? No, exactly. And I feel like there's a lot of, people in my life too, who will be like, "Oh, you're making Mimi sad when you don't give me a hug," and it's like putting your feelings on my child is unfair. You're not going to guilt children into giving hugs. That feels awful.
Exactly.
You know? So,
yeah. Well, I have been hugged and kissed by people who are drunk. And they smell like bourbon. Or people who are drunk and they've peed their pants. And just think about how your children is going to interact with that person. How yucky it is, because it's very yucky.
I completely agree with you.
But like you said, making sure that children know that they have a right to say no. Yeah. Because that's going to help a lot in that continuing conversation about consent and having control over their own bodies and who touches their bodies, which I think is really important. I love that you're doing this.
Oh, thank you.
So, what's another question? Read a question, dear.
Okay. I had a question about educating children about sexuality, and obviously an area where things can go wrong because most children do have those natural urges. How do you separate, where do you draw the line between the good and the bad in informing your kids about these sexual issues?
And of course, we're talking about different age groups here as well.
Oh,
so
obviously.
We're talking about, young children.
Yeah.
How do you teach young children consent? How do you do that?
Well, at our house, just because I can speak on that better than anything, we just started having the conversation, and my children were young. Right now I have a 9-month-old, I have a 3-year-old, I have a 6-year-old, and I have an 8-year-old. And we probably really started emphasizing consent about a year ago, when I was doing this work and I was recognizing how important it was.
Yes.
And also, like, I'm raising 4 daughters, and I want them to know if they say no, we should listen. Anyone should listen.
Right.
No means no. And so that was another big reason behind it. I want them to be confident in being able to say no. But we just started having conversations around consent, and like, if you want to give your sister a hug, or if you want to take a picture of your sister, or you want to do these different things, we just started practicing it in our house. And like, I would ask them, like, can mommy give you a kiss? Because I don't want to assume my children always want me kissing them or hugging them.
Right.
And so we just started to implement it at home. And like, even for my daughters, like, if they wanted to climb up on our laps, it was like, what about my consent? Like, you should ask mom too, because maybe I don't want someone on my lap right now. And we don't do it in a way that's like, makes them feel bad. It's really just about, like, we all have the choice and saying yes or no.
But and that gets them in the right mindset of, can I do this? Can I do that?
Yeah.
And then if someone comes up and starts hugging them, no, you didn't ask me.
Yes.
You have to ask me. Yeah. And I don't want you to, so go away.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it's funny because, like, I have these conversations all the time with my children. And one time I brushed the hair out of my 6-year-old's face and I kissed her forehead. And she looked up at me and she's like, "Mommy, you didn't ask consent." And I was like, "You're right. I didn't." And yep. And it's like, yep. And I want you to always feel comfortable in telling someone that.
And Lindsey, we're coming down on time here.
Sure.
You volunteer for a nonprofit. I'd like to talk a little bit about that if we can. We'd like to give them a plug.
Sure. Oh, of course. Yeah, I have been a volunteer mentor with Bio Girls for the last 3 years. And Bio Girls is a preventative mental wellness program that really looks at working with young girls. And the mission is to improve the self-esteem of adolescent girls. So my daughter is a participant in Bio Girls. She's finally gotten to the age where she can participate.
Your 8-year-old?
And so my oldest daughter.
Yeah,
And so I'm a mentor, and basically what that looks like is every week I get to go hang out with these little awesome, amazing kiddos, and we get to talk about really important things, and like building their confidence, building their self-esteem, talking through hard things that might happen and how we can be resilient. And I really enjoy it. I love the program. I believe in the work that they're doing. And obviously, as a mother to 4 little girls, it's really important for me that my daughters are growing up to feel good about themselves and be confident little humans.
And we have the information for Bio Girls on our website, on our Facebook page that you can do.
Awesome.
Lindsey, we're running out of time. Thank you so much. You just gave us a wealth of information about stopping or preventing child sexual assault and abuse today, and we can't thank you enough for joining us today.
Yeah, and for more information, go to the
Facebook
information
page.
on our Facebook page.
Yep. Thanks for joining us, people, and we'll see you on Thursday. Bye-bye.